I found the worst scene from every Star Wars movie, and we're gonna go through them all in chronological order as I explain why each scene is so awful. Then at the end, I'll rank the scenes and crown one scene as the worst in all of Star Wars. So strap in and get ready because this is gonna get rough. Starting with The Phantom Menace, the worst scene in this movie is definitely this moment right before the pod race, where this Eopie lets one rip right in front of Jar Jar. This scene is bad just because it's so dumb. The sound effect they used is so cartoonish. It's actually almost funny how out of place it is. There's definitely some other Jar Jar scenes that compete for the top spot, but I just had to go with this one. Moving on to Attack of the Clones, once again, there's tons of really great options. Pretty much any scene with Anakin and Padme could qualify as the worst, but in the greater context of Star Wars, this scene is far and away the dumbest. It's the morning after Anakin massacred the Tusken Raiders, and understandably, he's not in a good place emotionally. I think everything Hayden Christensen did here was perfect, honestly. It's Padme's reaction that gives this moment the honor of being the worst in this movie. I mean, come on, Anakin says some really crazy stuff here. He believes that he should be all-powerful, to the point that he can stop people from dying, and he says that Obi-Wan, his closest friend, is acting against his best interest. Not to mention the actual killing of the Tuskens, who Anakin compares to animals. But you know, to be angry is to be human. Yep. Her entire face gives me the idea that all she's thinking is, he's so hot when he's acting like a Sith Lord. Like, Padme, can you not hear the Imperial March playing not so subtly in the background? She should have known that the only way this would end is with Anakin choking her on Mustafar. But apparently he really regretted that decision, which is why he yells after Palpatine tells them that she passed. I really love Revenge of the Sith, and for all of its flaws, there's really not a standout bad scene except for this one in my opinion. This scene is supposed to be heartbreaking, representing the fact that it's still Anakin inside of the Darth Vader suit, but the simple reaction of just saying no to hearing the love of your life is dead doesn't quite fit, and then it's drawn out to an absurd degree, pitched to sound like a whale mating call instead of James Earl Jones. As a viewer, after being totally locked in from Order 66 all the way through the Battle of the Heroes, this moment made me snap out of it and just want to bust out laughing despite myself. Oh, but I almost forgot. Since it had a theatrical release, I have to consider the Clone Wars movie as a Star Wars movie, even if it was just a stitched together TV arc. I think the worst scene from this movie is the introduction of Rada the Huttlet. When Anakin and Ahsoka find him, he's clearly very sick and just constantly crying as if he's a human baby. It's a weird moment. The scene immediately pans to Jabba like we're supposed to have some sympathy for him. And yeah, that's his kid, but no one forgets that big impression of him that we get from Return of the Jedi. Nobody likes him, and for good reason. So why should we care about his son? The introduction to Rada also changes the course of the whole movie as it transitions from Anakin meeting Ahsoka to the mission of returning Rada to Jabba. That second half of the movie is definitely underwhelming compared to the rest. Next in chronological order is Solo. For a movie with as many haters as it has, it doesn't do much that's blatantly bad. But I've got to admit, the scene where Han and Lando put L3 into the Falcon makes no sense at all. Since her introduction, L3 was obsessed with droid rights. It's honestly a compelling idea even if L3 was super annoying about it. Not to mention that she had a close relationship with Lando, and the pair spent tons of time together over the years. So then, in what's supposed to be an emotional moment where she's just been completely destroyed, the first thing they do with what's left of her is upload her data onto the Falcon, essentially permanently trapping her inside of the ship. I have so many problems with this on so many different levels. First, it totally goes against L3's whole droid rights thing, which Lando at least halfway bought into. Why slave her into the ship? It also makes the Falcon somewhat sentient or something. There's more to the ship than just it being the fastest hunk of junk in the galaxy. This negates Han's skills as a pilot then, since they needed L3's mind to do the Kessel Run, which was supposed to be Han's most impressive achievement. Lastly, in connection with the end of the movie, it doesn't make sense why Lando would be so willing to gamble away the last remaining piece of L3 he has left. I wish her character's existence could be wiped off the face of the planet, because I love everything about this movie except for her. Our next movie, Rogue One, is actually my favorite Star Wars movie of all, second only to Episode 3, so I don't really have an issue with anything in this movie. For the sake of the video though, I do have to choose, so I've got to say that I have an issue with Tarkin's deep fake face. I've always thought that the Tarkin and Leia scenes were perfectly fine until I rewatched Rogue One on its anniversary this year. I think Tarkin's introduction was well done, but the scene where the Death Star fires on Jedha, as well as the scene before the Death Star blows up Scarif, are particularly bad. It's one of those things that I just can't place, but everything he does is uncannily weird. The sunkenness of his cheeks and the redness around his eyes really drew my attention to how his eyes move. Everything about it feels unnatural, even more so than a video game cutscene. It's like, in an attempt to make him look more real, he actually looks older than he did in A New Hope. He's a resurrected, zombified version of himself. Everything about him is totally unnatural in this movie, and it detracts from some pretty cool moments where the Empire shows off the Death Star's potential. Let's get away from Disney Star Wars and go on to the original trilogy, starting with A New New Hope. It's hard to find anything seriously wrong with this movie. It's a gem to say the least. I'll glaze it till the day I die. But the scene where Han talks to Jabba in the Mos Eisley spaceport really falls flat for me. For starters, it's a complete rehash of what Han just went through with Greedo. Jabba put a big price on Han's head because he doesn't have the money. Greedo even says it's too late for Han to go talk to Jabba, but Han does it anyway. And then when they meet, Han completely dictates the conversation, which is totally out of character for Jabba. You would think a big-time crime boss would have to save face in front of all of his men, but he lets Han quite literally step on his tail and get exactly what he wants. No one should be getting away with that. And considering Han's bad track record, there's really no reason why Jabba should let him off the hook. And of course, I can't forget the fact that Jabba looks absolutely awful in this scene, no matter what special edition you look at. I'm sorry, Jabba, you're a wonderful human being either way, I'm just saying. But let's keep going. Once again with episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, anything I decide on for the worst scene is going to be a major nitpick. For many of you, this is the best Star Wars movie of all time, and I don't blame you, it's great from start to finish. The incest kiss on Hoth does jump out to me though. For me, the biggest thing is how out of character this is for Leia. What we've seen of her in episode 4 portrays her as a brilliant figurehead and leader of the rebellion. A woman who spent her whole life in the Senate and surrounded by politics wouldn't stoop this low. So how does she become so infatuated with Han this quickly that she felt the need to kiss the first eligible bachelor in sight for no apparent reason other than revenge? Keep in mind, at least on screen, Han and Leia haven't kissed yet, and they won't until much later in The Empire Strikes Back. There's really no foundation for a relationship between them yet, just occasional semi-flirtatious banter. So yeah, maybe it's just me, but her first thought being to kiss Luke just to make Han jealous seems extreme for anyone, but especially a woman like Leia. And don't get me started on the fact that they're siblings. Yes, obviously they don't know, but incest. Ugh. Let's wrap up the originals and talk about Return of the Jedi. And I'd be wrong if I decided to go with anything else except the Jedi Rock's performance. It's not like having music is unusual in Star Wars. The Cantina band in Mos Eisley is absolutely fire if you ask me, but the focus on Jabba's band is not only unnecessary, but it's executed horribly. Maybe it's just me, but the music doesn't quite fit the vibe of Jabba's palace at all. In other versions, the band plays much more mellow songs with very little vocals. The up-close shots of the badly done CGI aliens are really creepy too, especially Sy Snootles. Like, why is she so close to me? I just got violated through the screen. It's one of those scenes that makes you feel shame and embarrassment, even though it has absolutely nothing to do with you. And then they pan to focus on the male singer, and we get a really great view of his mouth and the spit coming off his teeth. Thanks, George. I mean, bro is singing his heart out, but it all legitimately sounds like nonsense. Solo executed a similar scene really well on the Crimson Dawn's ship, where that one lady sings nonsense, and it just sounds like good background ambiance. We need some more of that here in Return of the Jedi. If you made it this far, I'm guessing you're a true fan of my videos, so you should definitely join my new Discord server. I'm gonna pick 3 random people out of the first 100 to join, and they'll win $20 each. But even if you don't get that, I'll be hosting events and talking to you guys in there, so join up. And now we're getting to the sequel movies, a trilogy filled with horrible scenes. But don't worry, we'll start off with the best of the bunch, The Force Awakens. It's such a retread of A New Hope that its story is pretty sound. And with that, not much room for really atrocious scenes. Nothing like what we'll see later. Even so, there's still quite a few options to choose from. A lot of people think the scene where Han and Finn interrogate Phasma is bad, or when Rey inexplicably takes the lightsaber away from Kylo Ren and proceeds to bash him over the head with her baseball bat saber. But in the greater context of Star Wars, this scene at the end of the movie takes the cake. It's so unbelievably stupid. Let me set the stage here. Starkiller Base has just been destroyed, Han Solo just died, and Finn is in critical condition. So understandably, everything is hectic at the Resistance base. But Chewie, who's still probably in shock, walks straight past Leia. He doesn't even look at her. Very surprising, but I'll excuse that one. But Leia, though, she doesn't even look at him. Like, how do you miss an 8-foot walking carpet? It's almost like she was intentionally ignoring Chewie. She's completely locked in on Rey, a girl who she's never met before. Shoot, they haven't even spoken to each other before. And Leia hugs her instead of Chewie. I've seen tons of different ideas for why everything happened this way in this scene. Chewie was just busy going to make sure Finn was okay. Leia felt Rey in the Force. Leia thought that Rey needed the comfort more than Chewie since she was young. Whatever. Honestly, I don't want to hear any of it. How would anyone completely ignore their longtime friend and protector who's just lost their best friend, who's also your husband? Like, come on, they should both be sharing these emotions. Rey is nowhere close to being as important. She barely knew Han to begin with. Yeah, she's just a kid who just went through her first battle, but please, Anakin was doing this when he was 9. Luke was doing this when he was her age, and they didn't have anyone looking out for them either. I guess it was really important that Chewie made sure Finn stayed alive just so he could make it all the way to Crate. He was on the verge of sacrificing himself to save the Resistance. Chewie ignoring Leia was all gonna be worth it, and this idiot Rose comes out of nowhere and smashes into his speeder in this big explosion. It's a good representation of the dumpster fire that is this movie. I mean, literally out of nowhere. The rest of the speeders turn back in the complete opposite direction. I'd imagine Finn is going full speed, so there's absolutely no way Rose should have been able to catch up. You can see in this shot just how far the distance is. So you're telling me Rose managed to turn that thing around, dodge all of the TIE fighters and ATM-6s, and run right in front of the whole First Order army? I guess, you know, saving what you love just gives that extra boost to get to the finish line, because she did it anyway. She saved him, dummy. With this one decision, Rose completely doomed the rest of the Resistance, and probably doomed her and Finn too. They're sitting ducks in front of a row of ATM-6s, not to mention that they were both injured in the crash. Finn would have had to carry her unconscious body all the way back to the base. Look how far it is. There's definitely no way they can just walk past the First Order and wave goodbye, right? Well, that's exactly what they do, and plot armor serves them well because they succeeded. Seriously, Ryan? Last and definitely the least good is The Rise of Skywalker, the culmination of terrible scenes. And believe me, there's a lot in this movie. I could have gone with They Fly Now, or the Reylo kiss, or even the dagger fitting the Death Star and horses on the Star Destroyer. But I'm sticking with this classic, somehow Palpatine returned. I'm still wondering, how did he return? I know Oscar Isaac wished he knew because delivering this line looked painful, and I don't blame him. How could you say those words knowing they destroyed the meaning behind Anakin's sacrifice as the chosen one, or taking away Luke's destiny as the culmination of the Jedi? I wouldn't wish that on anyone. This line even destroyed The Rise of Skywalker's own ending. What if somehow Palpatine returned from returning? You know what I mean? This scene is really, really bad. Maybe even the worst of all Star Wars.